A policy blitz and a debate invitation sent to the door of the Prime Minister. Here's the lowdown of what Nigel Farage said in his first major speech since the local elections. My name's Tom Harwood and this is GBN Originals. Well, it's been almost a month since the Reform Party caused a huge upset at the local elections. They won control of 10 councils, won hundreds of councillors, 2 metro mayors and 1 extra parliamentary seat. Today was the victory lap. Yes, Nigel Farage wants us to stop thinking of the Reform Party as a party of protest and start thinking of that party as a potential party of government. And that means policy, much more fleshed out policy than we've seen from that party up until this point. And there was a particularly pointed policy announcement today on spending, both on benefits and on pensions. 2 areas where Nigel Farage clearly feels the Labour government has a weak point, a pressure point to press to try and force the government into further U-turns. It was only less than a week ago that the Prime Minister announced at Prime Minister's Questions that he was to U-turn on the winter fuel allowance cuts made by his Chancellor ahead of her first budget. But how much will the Prime Minister U-turn? What will be the new threshold at which people receive the winter fuel allowance? And crucially, the threshold at which they stop receiving the winter fuel allowance? Will it be restored in full, or will that be too much of a humiliating U-turn for a Chancellor who said that the benefit was unaffordable and that it shouldn't go to people who are millionaires, either by income or by wealth? Well, this is a huge moment of division now in politics because Nigel Farage says he will restore the winter fuel allowance in full to every pensioner, rather than just to a expanded franchise of pensioners. This is trying to create some clear blue water, some difficulty for the Labour government as they try and scrabble together what exactly their policy offer will look like at the next fiscal event. All we know is that the winter fuel allowance is to be restored to more pensioners at the next fiscal event, but we don't know how many more pensioners. Nigel Farage is turning the thumbscrews here to try and make the government expand it to as many as possible. Of course, he is proposing a uniform, universal allowance as it was before Rachel Reeves' initial cut. But that's not all. There's another pressure point that the government is facing, and that is the 2-child benefit cap. Yes, under the previous Conservative government, a cap was introduced in terms of how much child tax credit you could receive. There was child tax credit given for the first child, for people under a certain income threshold, the second child, but not the third, fourth, fifth, etc. children. There was that cap come in at 2 children. Why? Well, the Conservatives argued it was 2 reasons. Number 1, it would save the taxpayer £3.5 billion, but number 2, there's a moral reason. People who aren't on benefits have to make a choice when they have children. How many children can they genuinely afford? And the theory goes that if you're someone who is earning a decent wage, but perhaps not the highest wage in the country, you scrimp and you save for your children. You think about how many children could be afforded. Is it fair? Is it right that people on far lower incomes, or perhaps no income at all, shouldn't have to make those same decisions that middle-class families have to worry about? Is it the case that people out of work should really be receiving more and more benefits for every child they have, when that isn't an option for so many other families, particularly hard-working families who do go to work? Well, that has been a debate for some time, and of course it was an argument that was seemingly accepted by the Labour Party, at least the Labour Party front bench, in the run-up to the 2024 election. But there have been wild disagreements within the Labour Party, particularly the backbenchers of the Labour Party, who've been saying that this 2-child benefit limit is cruel, that it pushes children into poverty, that families who haven't planned to have 3 children suddenly have less money to afford afford them, that some families who were experiencing good economic times when they had a number of children fell into hard economic times later, and then they're stuck in a rut without enough money to make the ends meet for their larger family. These are all considerations that charities have put forward to the government, and to be fair, there is a government child poverty review currently taking place. Which is why it's a canny move for Nigel Farage to step in and say that the Reform Party, if in government, would spend that extra £3.5 billion abolishing the two-child limit on child benefit. That is a big move. It puts the Reform Party to some degree to the left of the Labour Party when it comes to this issue. But it also piles pressure on the Prime Minister to do the same, to meet the Reform Party's promise on this issue. But it also creates a political trap. Because of course, Nigel Farage will be asked, how are you going to afford this? How will you pay for this? How will you pay for restoring the winter fuel allowance at the cost of perhaps £1.5 billion? How will you pay for abolishing the two-child benefit cap at a cost of perhaps £3.5 billion? How are you going to find this extra £5 billion? It's a huge amount of money. Nigel Farage says that he will cut areas of government spending. He'd scrap net zero. He'd cut 5% from Quango spending. Although, of course, it's fair to say that one of those Quango's spending includes the NHS. Would that be cut? We don't have answers as this stands. But he also says he'd cut asylum, hotels and multiple home ownership organisations as well. The accommodation bill for asylum seekers. He says he wants to cut DEI spending. That's diversity, equality and inclusion spending in this government. But it's unclear as to where he gets his figures. He suggests that £7 billion could be saved there. It's hard to see where those numbers come from. But is this all a moot point after all? Because is this press conference from Nigel Farage not designed to actually fund the pledges that he is making, but instead to force the government into U-turning on these specific pledges? And if it does, it won't be the Reform Party that has to find the money. The election's not for another 4 years, even if the Reform Party were to win it. No, instead it would be for the Labour government to find the money if they want to change tack on this policy at this point in the Parliament. And that is a big political question. Could Nigel Farage force his political opponents to do the hard work for him, to dot the I's and cross the T's when it comes to those spreadsheets so that he doesn't have to? Well, it's worth speculating that that is indeed what the Reform Party leader wanted to do. But that wasn't everything in today's press conference. No, far from it. There was something also much more profound, perhaps something more eye-catching for the seasoned political observer. And that was Nigel Farage's challenge to Sir Keir Starmer: debate me. But don't just debate me anywhere. Debate me in a red wall seat, a former mining community. Debate me in a working men's club. Let's both take questions from the members of that club and see who those working men's club members prefer. That was Nigel Farage's offer to Sir Keir Starmer, who, let's not forget, as Prime Minister has issued a debate offer to Nigel Farage already, although it's unclear when this debate would be, seemingly perhaps before the next general election, which could be 4 years away. Nigel Farage said, no, I don't want to wait for 4 years, let's do it much sooner, and let's do it on your turf. Although it's quite questionable in terms of whose turf it is now. If you look at the Reform gains at the local elections, if you look at the polling in the country, pollster after pollster is now putting the Reform Party in first place, well ahead of the Labour Party and the Conservative Party too. Could it be that Nigel Farage feels confident about debating in one of these areas because the polls suggest that he is more popular than the Prime Minister in these areas? Well, it's interesting. Would the Prime Minister take up such an offer, or will Sir Keir Starmer issue a counter-offer? Because from the perspective of the Prime Minister, that's what he wants the debate to be. He wants it to be Labour versus Reform, not Labour versus the Conservatives. And why is that? He believes that he could squeeze anti-reform voters into a sort of forced coalition to back Labour to keep out Nigel. A stop Nigel Farage ticket, he believes, could be more fruitful at election time than a pro-Keir Starmer ticket. And it's easy to see why Labour strategists have come up with this idea. It's always more fruitful for an incumbent government to present the opponents as dangerous or scary than it is for Sir Keir Starmer to magic up some popularity that, let's face it, he never really has had as a Labour Party leader. People refer to the 2024 general election as a landslide, of course, but a loveless landslide. A landslide that was won on the lowest share of the vote for a decent parliamentary majority in modern British history. So, what will happen now? Well, might this debate happen? And if so, is it in the interests of both Nigel Farage and Keir Starmer to present the division in politics now as a Labour reform division rather than a more multiplex division between 5 different parties that are all polling in double digits as we speak? Well, that of course remains to be seen whether or not this debate does actually happen. But it's easy to see how both Nigel Farage and Keir Starmer almost uniquely want this debate to take place. So we'll keep a close eye on that and the negotiations that are going on currently over the airwaves, but perhaps behind the scenes too. We'll keep an eye on that over here at GBN Originals. But also too, the Labour Party has now got to answer this challenge on winter fuel and this challenge on 2 child benefit limits. How will they respond to that challenge? That remains to be seen. But all of the indications, particularly after the last Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, well, all the indications seem to be that the Labour Party is drifting in the direction of U-turning on both of these issues. That would add another feather to Nigel Farage's bow, or indeed his arrows. Well, do stay with us here on GBN Originals. Remember to click that subscribe button to stay up to date of all of those twists and turns in the burgeoning fight between the Reform Party and the Labour government.